I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Michael Jansen, Chief Research Officer, guides the practice's research agenda and architecture by leveraging his extensive experience to identify and unlock emerging trends. Abhishek Singh is a Vice President and co-leads Everest Group's IT services research. Abhishek is based in New York and advises enterprises on their technology service needs and service providers on their growth strategies. CJ, partner, leads Everest Group's global IT services practices. He works with leading enterprises on their technology sourcing issues and advises the world's leading service providers on their growth strategies. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Michael. Go ahead, Michael.
All right, thank you, Claire. And it is an absolutely marvelous day here in Dallas, Texas. Sun's out, perfect temperature, and the leaves are turning all kinds of colors here. So I also wanted to start out with a best wishes on Diwali Day for those that are celebrating that. I know that's an important holiday, and it is upon us. So let's get started here. And what we want to do is we're going to take you through our views on the IT outsourcing marketplace. And so what we're going to do is break it into 3 sections. We're going to talk about, we're going to look a little bit back and what we've seen happen, what we think is happening as we move ahead. That'll include some views from how the pandemic has influenced this sector of the industry. We'll talk about our views on the recovery, and there has been a lot of change in the last few weeks here, few months. And then there's been some evident winners and losers in this sector. Some people that are making significant growth strides and are pulling ahead, and others that are struggling and have taken some setbacks. We'll talk about our growth convictions, and then we'll talk about the future of sourcing and delivery. So with that, Abhishek, talk to us about how you see the growth and what are our projections for going forward.
Absolutely, and thank you, Michael, for setting up the context. So folks who are looking at this particular slide, this gives you a view of organic as well as constant currency view of IT outsourcing growth. As you can see, starting Q4 of 2018, where that number of 5.1% appears, the industry was already on a decline. What really happened with coronavirus coming in is that it just hammered the curve to fall off a cliff. Now, here is the silver lining. The cliff wasn't really deep. Industry pundits were actually projecting anywhere between 10 to 15% of degrowth in the following quarters since Q1 of 2020. Instead, the degrowth held up at minus 4.2% and actually swung back in Q3 to a level which is kind of retaining the revenue numbers the previous year's levels. Now, if you're trying to trying to find a double-click view on this as to which were the industries which were really growing or degrowing, let me give you a very quick answer to that without going into too much of detail. Most industries degrew. Only healthcare and life sciences among the industries that we were tracking was able to keep its neck above water. So at this point, the question in your mind probably is, okay, good. For the industry, things seem to be returning back, but what about service providers themselves? How are they faring? Is there a spectrum out there in terms of who are performing really well, who waded through the crisis really well versus the ones who could not? And that is why I would like to hand it over to CJ to talk through some of those details as regards what's really happening with the service provider landscape. CJ, what do you think?
Question, Abhishek. And if you really look at this chart, I think it is very interesting because if you look at it, all the smaller mid-tier providers, they seem to be growing significantly faster than some of their larger peers. So with the exception of Infosys, most of the large service providers across different categories took a significant beating as a result of the pandemic. Whereas if you look at the smaller players like Genpact, Hexaware, Emphasis, LTI, and EPAM, they seem to be weathering the storm pretty well. And there's some pretty impressive growth. So if you look at companies like LTI and EPAM, they are growing significantly close to double digits or more than double digits in the middle of this entire pandemic. So one of the questions that comes to my mind is that whenever we see a crisis of this sort coming upon the industry, one of the common reactions that we see from a sourcing standpoint is to consolidate vendor portfolios. And typically when enterprises consolidate vendor portfolios, the ones which have smaller share, the smaller vendors tend to get squeezed, and at the expense of the larger vendors consolidating their share within client portfolios. And this is an interesting chart because this shows us that that's possibly not happening, or not happening to the extent that we have typically seen in the past. So clearly, value in the industry is going beyond economies of scale, even in the middle of a crisis like the one that we are currently dealing with. So I think that's very interesting. The other interesting point that we see is if you look at the bottom left of the chart, if you look at DXC and IBM GTS, which is IBM's infrastructure business, and of course, all of this now changes given the divestiture of that IBM is going through. Those companies, they have having growth troubles for a fairly significant period of time. And the pandemic doesn't change that. It doesn't pull them back even further, arguably. They continue to be in that zone of degrowth. And one of the big issues about degrowth for DXC and IBM has really been the attack of the hyperscalers and the cloud providers. So, I'd like to ask Michael, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, so I mean, those are the dots that are not on the chart there, right? When we look at the numbers there, you're approaching or over $81 billion in revenues just for the three big cloud providers, and they're growing at 38%. So, I look at that and say, it's not a like for like in terms of the services, in terms of kind of the big picture, but there is that insidious eating away at the infrastructure services that's going to continue to come into play here. I think that, while you can't just substitute and say, I'm going to do a lift and shift, I'm going to go from one of these players and on the chart here and say, I'm going to go over to Amazon. You can do it. You can't do it the whole thing at one time, but you can do parts and pieces of that. And as you move to more as a service type offerings, that becomes even a bigger part and accelerates the trend that we're seeing here.
Absolutely. And one of the things we are going to talk about more is how cloud can commoditize and cannibalize traditional models, but it also opens up new models as opportunities for the market. And we are also going to have an interesting point around how you were thinking about your vendor portfolios. Are you thinking of consolidation, or are you thinking of retaining more agile, smaller service providers? Moving on, we get into a conversation around vendor portfolios. Michael, do you want to handle this one?
Yeah, and just one final remark on that last chart. I mean, the good news is the industry has done well. Okay, we're going to show Abhishek's going to show you a chart here in a few minutes here about their profit margins, and the industry as a whole has held up very well. I mean, it's not like the industry's failing and struggling like other industries. So that's some really good news. So let's hear from you. What do you think folks are doing out there in terms of their vendor portfolio? And Amanda's going to open up the poll here to get your input. So what should the following moves will you use to optimize your vendor portfolio in 2021? And if you're a service provider, what do you see your clients asking for or doing? Okay, the numbers are coming in. We'll leave it open for another 10 seconds here. there's a horse race between two of them. It's tied, it's not. One's moving ahead. All right, we got two horses down to the end. All right, so let's close the poll. All right, so CJ here, it's definitely a push toward consolidation of the mid-sized providers. And we didn't see that with the small ones, but with the consolidation of the mid-sized providers. But you know what? The next one there is considering change, but still thinking about it. So there's still some people on the sideline here. All right, so let's do this. Let's do this. Abhishek, talk to us about the cloud. Do a little more commentary on the cloud. How is it coming into play here from a more than just the big boys?
Absolutely. And Michael, as you were pointing out, because of cloud-based technologies, the entire world of procurement has been changing. It has changed the way services are procured, and it has changed the way services are supplied. Now, if you look at this particular chart, there are so many, we are showcasing 6 categories, and maybe there can be more or less, depending on how you slice and dice the supply side industry. But essentially, the way the growth strategies of these organizations and the value proposition that they are bringing to the table are changing. Everybody wants a piece of the services pie. In fact, I'll take it a step ahead and say that it's not even a piece of the pie. Most of them want the entire cake. That's how it's kind of trying to appear. So if you look at some of the strategies playing out here, like the hyperscalers, the way they are trying to abrogate all the service components that could be provided by virtue of their cloud platforms. And hence their value proposition seems to be like kill services, productize everything on their own platforms, and own the entire ecosystem. If you look at ISVs, which are on the right-hand side of the picture, they're trying to build a ring that binds all of them. That's a Lord of the Rings kind of an analogy here. But the way they are trying to build out their platforms is to own the entire stack, right? Starting from applications down to the middleware and providing all of the service in an as-a-service manner. Similarly, if you look at the traditional service providers who are covered here under the SI umbrella, their aspiration is to orchestrate all of it. They know that while working with CIOs, they see them really going through the rounds of the issues that they kind of end up facing due to the complicated ecosystem that they have as regards their vendor ecosystem, whether these are infrastructure vendors, these are telecom companies, whether they have platform players. The CIOs who they work with need help in orchestrating all of that. And hence, the way SIs have been thinking about it is to help their clients orchestrate all of the pieces here. Now, in between all of this, I know all of them have specific plays and how they're thinking of working the supply ecosystem in their own ways. I won't go into each one of them in as much detail, but there is one player that I wanted to point out here was IBM. So after spinning off their legacy infrastructure business, which CJ was alluding to earlier, they are now really trying to create an entirely new model of owning the cloud procurement through their Red Hat acquisition. And hence, they want to sit in a different piece or part of this entire chart. And we are waiting and watching to see how that plays out. The jury is still out on that. Now, keeping the focus onto the services side, and if I want to spend more time just talking about the SI segment itself, I'll move on to the next slide to give you a picture of what's really happening there. If you look at this particular chart, there are 3 capability groups that we have put together in terms of what they bring to the table as regards services in front of the enterprise clients. The consulting heritage players, the likes of Accenture, IBM, GBS, and Capgemini, application heritage players such as Cognizant, HCL, Infosys, Wipro, and TCS, infrastructure heritage players such as Atos, DXC, IBM, GDS, Unisys, and NTD. And as you can see, amongst these 3 groups, which are indicated by the blue, the orange, and the red line, what we have seen is that the applications and the consulting heritage players have, in the last few years, shown trailblazing growth. In fact, they have held up the industry growth, while at the same time, the infrastructure heritage firms have kind of lagged and lagged by a lot. In fact, they have been in the negative growth territory for most of the period that we have been tracking them. Interestingly, in this mix, we have also put a category of players called challengers. These are players who do not, who kind of cut across a lot of these categories that we are talking about, uh, whether it's applications, consulting, in certain cases, BPS, and all of these. Now, they have been able to carve out a distinct growth trajectory for themselves. A large part of it you could understand by way of the size at which they are. So there's a size functionality, low base effect playing out in terms of them getting to a higher level of growth. But there is something about the nature of their operating model that is also allowing them to kind of grow in this market, which lends itself to their ability to provide contingent talent, their agility in trying to respond to client needs, etc., which have also helped them. Now, the question in your minds is, how does that operating model really work out for these four groups that we are talking about, the three capability heritage areas and also the challengers? So CJ, on this question of the operating model themselves, what do you think is really happening with these different groups and categories?
I think that's a very important, yeah, I think that's a very important question, interesting question. I think what's really happening is, if you really think of the infrastructure heritage players, they, and Michael alluded to it earlier when we spoke about cloud, I think they are increasingly being challenged there. I think for application-centric players, in some ways, it's easier to make that pivot to a digital leader because they are going to have challenges. They are going to have challenges in retaining the traditional arbitrage-based model, but at the same time, they don't have the heavy asset base that a lot of infrastructure heritage players have. And they will continue to be in demand, though their operating model will necessarily continue to evolve and become more agile. I think consulting is interesting because one of the things that we have seen is that consulting becomes very important in moments of crisis, but at the same time, it's highly discretionary, and that changes. Demand for that tends to get held up pretty easily. What's very interesting to think about is not just the revenue chart, but also how we are seeing the margin structures getting affected or not so affected by the pandemic. So while overall industry growth has started, margin structures seem to have held up along similar lines over the last 3 quarters. And in certain cases, they have actually improved. And if you look at the application-centric group, they have actually managed to boost their margins, as has the challenger category and even the infrastructure heritage category in the 3rd quarter. They have been coming out of it. What's very interesting to notice that the consulting heritage category, they are kind of, they went through the dip and they're stabilizing as well. So question really is, are we beginning to see some release of discretionary spending back in the market, and will we continue to see that trend accelerating or strengthening in 2021? So from a demand standpoint, I think that's an interesting question for us to watch out for. The key point here, though, is that a lot of the margin stabilization and in many cases improvement have been a direct result of supply side freezes in spending. So because all of us have been working remotely, we don't have travel costs, we don't have facility costs, we don't have a lot of infrastructure costs. So all of those help in shoring up margins for service providers. The question really is, as and when we get back to a more normal world, or whatever the new normal or that hybrid world looks like in 2021, whether those margins will continue to sustain, right, partly because of higher growth and utilization, or whether those margins will come under attack because the cost basis will start creeping back to normal. And if you look at the individual players within each category, we have the leaders there. So Accenture, TCS, Atos, and LTI, they have been leading the margins within their the race for margins within their categories. So it'll be interesting to see as the industry hurtles down into a post-pandemic world, with a lot of other disruptive forces which are secular in nature and have been there even before the pandemic, whether the traditional margin structures are sustainable. And that is something that we'll have to keep a close eye on.
Yeah, I think CJ, I think this is really important here in terms of the margins being healthy here. I think it's really important that people pay attention. I know you have other charts that are showing individual companies, but I did want to, as we move on to the next section here, I did want to, we have the opportunity to offer a conversation with CJ and his team, and I wanted to make that available. We're going to have a separate offer for enterprises, but for providers. CJ, what are you offering for participants in this webinar?
Yeah, so clearly we live in a highly uncertain and volatile world, and getting into 2021, one of the things that's becoming evidently clear to everybody that I speak with, that a lot of the plans that have been made, a lot of the business plans that have been made essentially need to be reevaluated. So we all need to go back to the drawing board. It doesn't matter which business we are in. A lot of those plans need reevaluation in the light of what's happening in the world. So the nature of opportunities as well as the extent of opportunities, be it in terms of growth or profit pools, those are shifting and evolving rapidly. And one of the things we are offering to our friends in the service provider community is Everest Group stepping in and helping you kind of get some insight through this fog, and rebuilding or reevaluating or stress testing the business plans for 2021 across different industry verticals like banking, healthcare, insurance, or life sciences, as well as different horizontal segments like applications and enterprise platforms, cloud and infrastructure, data, security services, etc. So what we're really helping a lot of clients with is understand what's the market forecast, which are the segments to double down on. And if you want to avail of this service, feel free to go through the poll.
No obligation here. If you're interested, just say yes. If you're not, say no, thank you. And we'll leave that open for another 5 seconds. And we'll go from there. And we'll have a different type of offer for enterprises coming up here. So, all right, Amanda, let's go ahead and close the poll, and then we'll go from there. All right, so we're going to move into our convictions. And so what will drive growth in 2021 was the overall. And the two convictions we're going to talk about today, and we have lots more, but just two to focus on today, is cloud is now fundamental, and we'll talk about the talent. So we're going to talk about the cloud and talent going forward here. And with that, CJ, let's talk about, let's take a double click down into cloud and what's that mean for the transformations.
Yeah, so we are deeply convinced that cloud is going to be a fundamental driver of growth. And we have been talking a lot about cloud, but we are terribly excited about the prospect of where it is leading us, because essentially, if you think about it, there is this massive replatforming of how we are thinking about business being done in our times. Cloud is basically becoming the platform of business. And when we polled our enterprise IT audience, 85% of them said that without cloud engine, without cloud being deeply embedded in everything that we do as an enterprise, we do not see ourselves being able to scale digitalization initiatives. So 85% of enterprises see cloud as being fundamental bedrock of any digital transformation that they may be trying to scale within their organizations. However, what's very interesting is that, again, when we peel the onion a little bit, we saw that there were two schools of thought. One school of thought is cloud for efficiency, which is essentially, we want cloud-based environments. So we want to build environments based on clouds. And this is primarily an infrastructure story. And essentially, the drive there was for efficiency. We want to reduce costs. We want to free up funding for digitalization. We want to have a single pane of glass. We want to have agility in the environment. And the metrics were fundamentally traditional IT metrics around efficiencies. And on the other hand, we had a certain school of thought emerging, which really says that cloud is much more than all of that. Cloud is really about digitalization, and without cloud, I can't do a business model shift. And that's really a very different philosophy, because it's not about cloud as the infrastructural layer. It's really about platforms and applications and data. So we want to move our applications, we want to build applications that are native to cloud. We want to have all our data on the cloud. We want to have different clouds talking to each other. We want to have data connectivity across all of that. And the values there, the enterprise business values there are very different, because you're really talking about business model shift. Hey, how can I get better monetization of data? How can I get growth in my digital business model? How can I have more subscribers to my digital business model? How can I have customer acquisition? All of that. And most importantly, what we are seeing over the last 3 years, as we have been tracking this shift, is that every year we see the proportion of champions for cloud for efficiency moving down, and the market maturing and moving towards a cloud for digital paradigm. And we believe that in 2021, what we are going to see is an inflection point, because if you look at where cloud for digital is really headed, in 2021, we are going to see an era where more than half the world, more than 50% of all large enterprises are going to embrace cloud in ways that are different from what we have traditionally thought of. So the movement to the cloud is going to be native. So cloud becomes pervasive and is really going to define the way we do things in 2021. And we believe that's going to be a tremendous growth driver within the context of our 2021 forecasts. And as we think about it, right, it's also very interesting that this opens a can of worms, because we are also talking of a new ecosystem emerging. So we are talking of a very specialist set of service providers coming up, right? Abhishek, how do you think of this new ecosystem that's emerging of service providers who can help enterprises embrace this?
Absolutely. And I think this is a very interesting topic for us to be having a conversation about. It's no more a debate, actually. If you look at this particular chart, and when it comes to cloud-based deals, what we are witnessing is that niche SIs, or SIs who are born in the cloud, seem to be winning the race. May not be so much on the deal TCVs of the size of the deals, but definitely so on deal volumes. As you can see in 2019, 70% of the cloud deals actually split in favor of the niche SIs out there. The question in your mind probably is, okay, why is that happening? I mean, given that there are so many formidable, well-established players out there in the market, why would such a large volume of deals go actually to niche SIs? There are primarily two reasons behind it. One is that cloud hyperscalers seem to rely a lot more, or are showcasing a higher level of reliance on these niche SIs. The reasons are the following. One, cloud hyperscalers believe that they are able to drive a stronger degree of control when it comes to architecture while working with niche vendors, in comparison to GSIs, where they run into issues as regards architectural control, wherein GSIs seem to hold up the flag for how clients think about their architecture and how they really want to move it. Since hyperscalers are currently in the race to kind of establish their own norms and architecture, and if you look at AWS, GCP, and Azure, all of them are in this race to kind of own the cloud. That's one of the ways cloud hyperscalers believe by working with niche SIs, they will have a higher level of control in determining how enterprises would move in the path forward as regards the baby steps or the steps that they are taking as regards their cloud transformation. Second thing is when it comes to even enterprises and how they work with different vendors, they are witnessing one interesting thing come out of their relationships and their experience of having worked with these niche SI vendors, which is niche vendors seem to showcase a higher degree of agility and a much highly tightly integrated integration with the hyperscaler stack that allows them to, one, provide the right kind of talent, and also some operating model changes that helps clients accelerate the path towards cloud. Hence, it's not without reason. If you have taken a notice of how M&A activity has actually exploded in the area around niche hyperscalers, we can go into multiple examples of how even the large GSIs have been focusing on tuck-in acquisitions, focus on niche SIs. So the question here is, where does that leave our traditional SIs? It is still a formidable supply ecosystem and the mainstay of how enterprises procure cloud services. And hence, if you look at this particular picture, this is an evaluation that we had conducted early this year in trying to understand how different vendors stack up against each other in terms of the capabilities that they bring to the table. Now, we don't have time enough to go into each of these vendors, but the fact remains that this is an evolving market. The last word has not really been written on who the winners and losers are in this space. This is evaluating at a very fast pace. And we do believe that niche SIs will have a strong role to play when it comes to capabilities that will really take them forward in trying to build expanded capabilities to help enterprises move forward in their journey towards cloud. So that's in a nutshell what we are trying to talk about here. What I would like to spend more time on, I know all of you are interested in knowing more about what's really going to drive growth. I'd like to spend more time talking about the aspect which is really turning out to be a huge opportunity in the short term, which is going to be around talent, which is our next conviction. And over to you, Michael, to kind of take us through that.
Yeah, so talent has always been a challenge at the C-suite. It's traditionally been around how do I get the right talent on board so that we can drive the culture and we can drive the initiatives. Right now, you hear a lot of noise about unemployment, but I will tell you though, if you look at the skills that are going to drive this or that drive the things that Abhishek and CJ have been talking about, talent is in short supply. So. We see that in the data. We see it in terms of the qualifications, the skills, the readiness, attrition. All those things come into play here. But what we wanted to do is, I don't think that talent shortages by itself is a new thing, but the things that people are looking for, those are new. And Abhishek, let's take it back down one double click into some of those new skills that are being required out there.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next slide. If you look at this particular slide, it's a bit of a slice of these skill segments that we end up tracking in this market. And as you look at the skill segments on the right-hand side and navigate the colored boxes as you navigate navigate through this chart, what is that one message that jumps out at you? For me, it's the very clear message that there indeed is a paucity of talent across the skill segments that we are talking about here. Whether we are talking about cloud-based services, security, cognitive, experience-based services, we notice that this lack in availability of skills ranges from anywhere between 10% to somewhere over 30% in specific areas, specific buckets of skill needs. Not only that, the issue is not only as we are trying to double click into each of these areas, what we are realizing is that the issue is not only with the availability of skills, it's also with the project readiness of the skills that are already available. And this is something that we are getting as a very clear feedback from clients. So, and it's actually a function of how skills have evolved. And Michael, what do you think? I mean, how are these skills evolving, which is really making it so difficult for both the enterprises to procure skills and suppliers to come up the curve in helping clients get to the talent model that they really want to?
Yeah, so the world has changed so much in terms of IT delivery. It used to be that you got your college degree in programming or some kind of a computer science degree. And the roles of yesterday, it was good to be an expert in those skills. It was get the training from your service provider, get the training from school, and you grew up with kind of we call the pre 2010 roles there on the next slide. And so it was it was about learning the programming language, getting context of how to do basic assembly of IT components. But that world is changing now. So as you look forward here, it becomes much more contextual about the business. And so CJ, when you look at this, how are organizations having to deal with this?
Yeah, I think this is a very fundamental challenge that we are seeing today because, with technology proliferation, we have this challenge coming up. And what we are seeing today is this, we are moving to a world where polyglots are more in demand than specialization. And this is a fundamental manifestation of the fact that we are moving from an industrialized operating model to a business value driven operating model. And if you really think about it, in the past, we had IT as IT and business at arm's length. In a digital world, IT is the business. There is no separation between IT and business. IT, all of us are in the business of technology in some way or the other. And I think that so whether you're just good at one thing doesn't really matter so much as whether you can actually get the job done from a business standpoint. And to get the job done, we are increasingly seeing a demand for people who are able to bring together a combination of skills. Now, trouble is that forget the combination of skills, even the component skills are not in adequate supply. And that creates a lot of challenges. And as we think about how customers are, how the world has really changed, and if we were to start making this very real, if you look at the left-hand side of the chart, the column in gray, those are all specialist roles. So you had a data quality analyst, you had a database administrator, you had a storage administrator. So these guys, you had people who are specialists in one particular technology, often aligned to one particular hardware vendor or one particular software vendor. So there's component of a stack. So somebody would be a specialist in Cisco network engineering, or somebody would be a specialist in Oracle databases, right? So, that's changed, right? And that's changed dramatically. And 2010 onwards, what we are beginning to see is two things. One is methodologies have changed. So we moved to an agile world at scale. So, and there's an entire ecosystem of tools which need to be plugged in, configured, and made to work. So we went from single tools to tool chains, and at every link of that chain, there's a plethora of choices. And all the permutations that result therein. The second thing that that happened is the technology itself changed radically. So cloud came into the picture, right? With cloud came a host of other things into the picture. So data and analytics started looking very different. We started talking about big data, but now we are talking about data on the cloud, right? So you're not only talking about somebody who knows how to run a query on different engines, but also has a working knowledge of how to do that on an AWS or an Azure. So the cross functionality started happening. And the roles started evolving as a result. And what we're seeing in this decade is the same trend, but only significantly more amplified and accelerated. So we're talking about roles like data ethnographer, data surgeons, and experience custodians. So in case you are wondering what these are all roles which actually exist today. All of these have been picked from actually live existing job postings. So if you were to think of an experienced custodian is essentially the point of triage between different application teams, business teams, and who continuously monitors customer feedback on digital products and is able to triage that in terms of what it means for user interfaces, product visibility, product search, so on and so forth. Now, what are the skills that an experienced custodian needs? What an experienced custodian needs is design skills, user UI design skills. An experienced custodian also needs to be highly data literate. An experienced custodian also needs to have the ability to enable a technical conversation with the development teams. An experienced custodian oftentimes also needs literacy in areas like consumer behavior and consumer psychology. And so the real question here is none of these things, none of these roles are out there in the market. We don't have ready-made people who are experienced custodians. So, you can't hire an experienced custodian, somebody who's been an experienced custodian for the last 15 years because things were just different back then. And so the big challenge for enterprises,
CJ, what you're really saying there, I think you're saying is you got to really people still have to start with the fundamentals on the left side, and it's a building kind of a layer cake approach that you get more context and more homogenization or bringing together different things to make one of these skills that you see on the right hand side. So we don't want to imply that the left hand side is dead. You still need those things.
Yeah, and it's not just I think the left-hand side is really the starting point, right? And your layer cake analogy is beautiful, Michael, because what you're really doing is you start, the real question for enterprises is, how do I transform a network architect into a 5G systems engineer, right? And that's the real question. What are all the skilling journeys? How can I keep taking people at scale through those journeys, right? And that's the real challenge for a lot of enterprises today, and that's where a lot of them are seeking help. Michael, back to you.
Yeah, Abhishek, let's talk about, do a real quick scan of the market.
Oh yes, so CJ touched upon skill journeys. You talked about how fast and how complex it is becoming for enterprises and service providers to kind of bring their existing skills up the curve to serve the needs of the industry. Now, this is an analysis that we ran earlier this year in trying to analyze the readiness of global service providers to serve the next generation IT services needs of the clients. And this is the picture that we arrived at. However, I have a quick caveat on this picture. This analysis is a bit different from the other peak matrix analyses that we have done, and there is a reason behind it. The reason here is because talent evolution or making talent ready for next generation IT services is such a fast evolving segment. A lot of vendors as well as enterprises are kind of trying to change their wheels while driving on the freeway. And that's really the situation that they are in currently. Hence, for now, what we see is that folks like Accenture, TCS, HCL, Wipro, and IBM seem to be leading the way in the way they are able to come up the curve as regards preparing their talent for future. The near future or even the far out future looks more closely aligned to how tuck-in acquisitions, how skilling journeys, etc., will get enabled within these organizations to align to the evolving ecosystem of technologies that is out there. Hence, watch this space. And this is not the final word on how the supply ecosystem will look like when it comes to the future of talent readiness, but definitely keep a track of how this is evolving. And I'm pretty sure enterprises would also be very, very interested in understanding as to what kind of help that they can get on this area. And that is why, Michael, I'll hand it over to you to talk through some of those elements.
Yeah, so we said we have a couple of offers, and this is an opportunity to get a slice of our insights, complimentary for enterprises. If you're interested in seeing what CJ and Abhishek and the rest of the team is seeing in respect to the vendors in this community, click on the quick poll that's going to come up here just shortly, and in this poll you will be able to select the peak matrix that you're interested in seeing, so we can get that to you. Again, this is for enterprises only, and we'll give you a free copy of this shortly after we get that and have an opportunity to discuss it with you. Okay, we'll just leave this open for another. It's actually pretty interesting. There's not any clear winner in this one either. It's interesting. All right, so what we'll do is we'll close this down. If you're interested in that, we can always get that to you as well afterwards. All right, so we're running short on time. Amanda, if you go to slide 20, we want to just talk a little bit about work from home. If you could just go to slide 25, and I'll likely touch on that one. So it's interesting, the whole work from home has evolved greatly. You know, the initial conversations was the scramble kind of to ensure we had the technology and ensure we had everybody was safe and things were jobs to get done. But as the conversations have evolved over the last 2 quarters, it has become a much different dialogue. It's no longer a work from home technology conversations, but it's become a workforce strategy dialogue. And so now folks are looking at not only the workplace of the future, but they're also looking at how work gets done. And so we have an entire set of folks that are looking at that dialogue, and we're not going to have time to go into that detail today, since I want to get some of these questions that have been posed by the audience. But let's just say it's going to be different. I think there has been a stretching of the rubber band where people have all kind of gone to the work from home. I do think it will come back as we get the vaccine in place and we get past this, and we will get past this. But I think the inclination to allow more work from home, I think that will never go away. So I think there's going to be a blend in the middle, and we'll have to think about this very differently as we move forward here. So what I want to do is go to the wrap-up slide on 28. CJ, if you had some final thoughts here you wanted to bring to our attention.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'll say is that 2021 promises to be a very interesting year, and we spoke about a bunch of things. So if I really have to summarize all of it, in the past, we have always thought of cost versus transformation as a trade-off. I think we are now in a place where we have to embrace that duality, that transformation necessarily needs to transform the cost model, and not just on a unit cost basis, but the entire cost model of the enterprise business. And I think that's a very refreshing, fresh perspective that we see a lot of our customers taking, and we'd strongly recommend that you also think about it from that standpoint. The second corollary to that, the second point, which is a corollary to the first, is that as you think about it, what the pandemic is really doing is weeding out a lot of science experiments. So we are not seeing things which are we are not seeing a lot of things which are esoteric, right? So a lot of those get filtered out. The real questions for a lot of enterprises on technology changes is really, is this going to scale, and is this going to transform my business model and my cost model? Last but not the least, we spoke a lot about talent, and I spoke a lot about talent. And one of the best things that we can suggest to enterprises is take a scientific view to it. What we really mean by it, have a rigorous baseline of what's your current skill inventory and what are the skills of the future coming up, and establish how your world fits around that perspective. Start from there, and then you will think about all the different journeys that take you to that destination. But the real scientific baseline is about what do we have today and what's available, and what does the future look like. So building that baseline and that vision around the skill inventory of the enterprise is a critical task for a lot of companies today. With that, Michael, I'll hand it back to you.
All right, so let's do some questions from the audience here, and I'm going to pose those to you guys, and you guys jump in with whoever thinks appropriate. So how much of the resilience shown by mid-tier providers is related to exposure profile of clients in significantly affected industries? And I'll just start with the fact that, as we talk to enterprise clients, definitely it's so different depending on which industry you're talking about. Some industries have been greatly affected. We don't have to list those off because I think you know that. Other industries, this has been an opportunity to use it as a crisis and create improvement. And other industries are thriving and actually moving forward here. But how's that play into the mid-tier providers?
Great question, and I think a lot of them have pretty representative exposure. So if you think of the overall third-party outsourcing industry, there is in any way a skew towards financial services and retail, manufacturing, CPG, and life sciences. And those are the dominant industries. And for most of the mid-tiers, at least the ones that we have profiled, we don't see it as being significantly different. There are some companies which I'm not sure if you showed up on the chart. So Mindtree, for example, is a company that has meaningful exposure to travel and hospitality. And they have taken that hit over there. But for a lot of the others, it's fairly representative of what's happening in the broader market.
So there's a related question there, CJ, that talks about the mid-sized service providers, or well, really, I think the real question is, will the deal size or ticket size come down going forward here? So do you see smaller deals in the future, or do you see a return to the mega deals?
I think there's a bit of a duality on that. I think the mega deals are actually getting bigger and bigger, right? And we have data. Our data suggests that the mega deals have actually grown by 20% in size, and also the number of mega deals have grown year on year in 2020. And what we believe is that the cost pressures for a lot of companies are going to lead to larger deals, because there's going to be an increasing appetite for consolidation of portfolios as well as divestiture of assets. So you're already seeing divestiture of a few shared services, and we have seen enough and more instances of divestiture of existing data centers, and that in turn fuels the journey to the cloud. And I think that trend will only accelerate going forward in 2021. So quick answer, we believe there's going to be a whole bunch of small deals, right? But the number of mega deals will increase, and the size of those mega deals will also go up.
Okay. Another question around the incentives or enablement from cloud service providers to promote cloud adoption. Whose enablement program is strong? Is it AWS, Azure, Google Cloud? Who are you most impressed with?
Great question. It's hard to choose a winner there, honestly, right? I think the kind of cash positions the hyperscalers are sitting on, and all three of them, right, as well as their appetite to invest in customer estates, their ambitions are breathtaking, honestly. And we have seen both Azure and AWS being equally aggressive, if not more, in terms of their appetite to invest. But I wouldn't count out Google either.
Yeah, so I think there's going to be a tendency for them to want to continue to grow and get into bigger and bigger deals, which means they need to become more and more industry-specific solutions. I think that comes into play. I don't know what you think on that, but industry-specific solutions are going to be absolutely required beyond just providing raw, electric power type services.
Absolutely, because this is one of the things that we have been witnessing in the area of cloud adoption, is that fit for purpose is becoming one of those parameters as to how enterprises now think about their cloud journey. So earlier it was all about, okay, there is a public cloud and everybody can hop onto it, and okay, there's an AWS out there, or is there Azure out there. Right now, different industries, and even within industries, different organizations are looking at their own estate and thinking about their own unique journeys to the cloud. And that is why industry specificity, as defined by these hyperscalers, will allow them to have meaningful conversations with clients who are really looking for these fit for purpose solutions.
Yeah, I have a question. It's not from the audience, but I have a question. Which one, and I'm not asking for an answer, but it's a rhetorical question, is you think about that, all those players on the some of those earlier charts in terms of growth, it would not be out of the question to see one of the hyperscalers to acquire one of the folks that are suffering or getting their base undercut by the cloud type efforts. I would expect that to happen in the next couple of years here, because the cash flow and the growth and the need to go upscale for the need to be able to incorporate the cloud from one direction, and then the need to be able to scale from the hyperscaler's perspective, if you will, and to have more sophistication. I think that's going to be absolutely critical. So I think that's certainly going to happen in some form or fashion in the next couple of years. All right. So that brings us to a conclusion here. I wanted to point out that we have lots of information available on the web. You can check out our blog. You'll see individuals from CJ's team, see some blogs and information. There's also a number of research content that's available to this topic. And you can certainly drop us a line, and we'll make sure we get your questions answered. And wanted to thank you for your time today, and look forward to a session with you in the near future. Happy Diwali.